The child's voice echoed through the Sonoran desert night, high and desperate, cutting through the silence like a blade through silk. "Help me, please, someone help me." The words bounced off the red rock formations, carried by wind that smelled of creosote and coming rain. Cassandra Morrison, 34, gripped her steering wheel tighter, her headlights cutting through the darkness on this isolated stretch of Route 60, 20 miles outside of Phoenix. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she slowed her Honda Civic, scanning the roadside where saguaro cacti stood like silent sentinels. The crying came again, closer now, more frantic. "Please, I'm lost! Help!" Every maternal instinct in her body screamed to stop, to search, to save. But something else whispered in the ancient part of her brain, the part that remembered when humans huddled in caves and feared the dark. The voice was too perfect, too practiced, like a recording played on loop. She saw movement then, a small figure stumbling from behind a boulder, pale arms reaching toward her headlights. The child couldn't have been more than 7 years old, wearing a torn white dress, dark hair hanging in matted tangles. Cassandra's foot hovered over the brake. The girl's eyes caught the light, and for just a moment they reflected like a cat's, glowing amber and ancient. Then Cassandra saw what crouched behind the child, rising from the shadows with fluid grace. The creature stood 7 feet tall, impossibly thin, with skin the color of desert bones bleached by centuries of sun. Its face was beautiful and terrible, frozen in eternal youth but marked by eyes that had witnessed empires rise and fall. When it smiled, revealing teeth that belonged to something that had never been human, Cassandra understood with perfect crystalline horror that she was looking at the thing making the child's voice, that the little girl wasn't real at all, just bait in a trap older than Arizona itself. If you connect with my story, please press the like button to find some light in this priest's heart. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next live stories, and tell me about them in the comments where you are watching this video and what time it is right now. It makes me very happy to know that from any corner of the country or the world you are listening to me. The creature had many names across the centuries. The Tohono O'odham called it walking thirst. Spanish missionaries whispered of El Bebedor de Luz in their journals. Modern paranormal investigators labeled it simply as the mimic of the superstitions. But the being itself remembered only one name, the one given to it in a life so distant it felt like a fever dream. Nathaniel Cross, aged 23 when death found him in 1847, eternal in the 200 years since. On this November night in 2024, Nathaniel stood in the Arizona darkness, his illusion of the crying child dissolving like smoke as Cassandra Morrison's car accelerated away, tires shrieking against asphalt. He didn't chase her. The hunger gnawed at his insides, a fire that never extinguished, but he had learned patience the way desert stones learned stillness. She would tell others, of course. They always did, and they never believed, not until it was too late. Nathaniel tilted his head back, letting the pre-storm wind wash over his face, and for the 1000th time wondered if the thing inside him that still remembered being human was a blessing or a curse. Tomorrow he would hunt again. Tonight he would remember what it felt like to be the one who needed saving, back when monsters were just stories told to frighten children, before he understood that some stories were memories written in blood. The transformation had come in the copper mines of Jerome, Arizona, when Jerome was still a boomtown clawing wealth from the earth's bones. Nathaniel Cross had been a surveyor's assistant, fresh from Boston, with dreams of making his fortune in the West. He'd descended into the mine on a Tuesday morning in August and emerged 3 days later as something else entirely. He never saw the creature that attacked him in those depths. He remembered only darkness, teeth, and the taste of his own blood mixing with something ancient and bitter that burned its way down his throat. When he crawled back to the surface, the sun felt like knives stabbing into his retinas, his skin blistered and smoked, and the heartbeat of every living thing within 100 yards thundered in his ears like war drums. The hunger came next, insatiable and all-consuming. He'd killed a prospector named William Hendricks, 41, that first night. Then a saloon girl called Sweet Marie, 26. Then a Chinese railroad worker, whose name he never learned, age uncertain. By the time he understood what he'd become, Jerome's new cemetery had 7 fresh graves and whispers of a plague spreading through the camps. Nathaniel taught himself control over decades, learning to extend the time between kills from days to weeks to months. He discovered his gift for mimicry by accident, calling out in the voice of a dying miner and watching a rescue party rush toward him. The ability evolved: children's cries, women's screams, men's calls for help, each voice a key to unlock the door of human compassion, that fatal flaw that made them such easy prey. He moved through Arizona's history like a shadow, always present but never permanent. He witnessed the territory become a state in 1912. He watched Phoenix grow from a small agricultural town into a sprawling metropolis. He saw the Hohokam canals restored, the dams built, the desert cities bloom like flowers after rain. And through it all, he fed. Never enough to draw too much attention, always careful to space his kills across vast distances and long periods. Missing persons in Arizona numbered in the thousands. Who would connect disappearances separated by months and miles? But something had changed in recent years. The hunger no longer satisfied the way it once did. Each life he took left him feeling emptier, more hollow, as if he were a vessel with a crack that widened with every passing decade. He'd begun to wonder if vampires could go mad, if immortality eventually corroded the mind the way rain eroded stone. He'd started making mistakes, using the child's voice more frequently because it worked so efficiently, hunting closer to populated areas, taking risks that his younger, more cautious self would have considered suicidal. Perhaps he wanted to be caught. Perhaps he wanted it to end. On a Thursday evening, 7 days after Cassandra Morrison's near escape, Nathaniel found himself in the parking lot of a Walmart on the outskirts of Tucson. Strip malls and shopping centers had become his new hunting grounds, replacing the lonely desert roads of previous centuries. Humanity congregated here in droves, anonymous and distracted, their faces buried in phones, their awareness dulled by routine. He stood in the shadow between overhead lights, perfectly still, and projected his voice across the parking lot. "Mommy! Mommy, where are you?" The voice of a lost child, frightened and alone. He watched a woman in her 50s pause, grocery bags in hand, head turning toward the sound. Too old, too aware. She kept walking. A young couple emerged from the store, the man carrying a case of beer. "Did you hear that?" the woman asked. Her name was Jennifer Reeves, 28, and she worked as a dental hygienist. Her boyfriend, Marcus Washington, 31, was a high school basketball coach. Nathaniel knew none of this, saw them only as potential sustenance. "Probably just kids messing around," Marcus said, but Jennifer was already moving toward the sound, her face creased with concern. Nathaniel deepened the distress in the phantom child's voice. "I can't find my mummy. Please help me." Jennifer broke into a jog, moving toward the edge of the parking lot where the lights faded into darkness. Marcus followed, calling after her. "Jen, wait up." Nathaniel positioned himself behind a dumpster, gauging distances, preparing to strike. The hunger roared through him, drowning out thought. But then a real child appeared. A boy no more than 9 years old came running from between parked cars, calling out in a voice raw with genuine panic. "Mom! Mom!" The boy's mother, Rachel Kim, 37, burst from the store entrance, her face pale with terror. "David! David, I told you to stay with me!" The real child and the false cry overlapped in the night air, and for a moment Nathaniel saw himself reflected in the boy's fear, remembered being young and lost and afraid. The memory hit him like a physical blow. He'd had a mother once, Sarah Cross, who died of cholera when he was 16. He'd had a sister, Emma, taken by scarlet fever at age 12. He'd been someone's son, someone's brother, someone who feared the dark and needed comfort. Jennifer reached the dumpster and stopped, confused. There was no child here. Marcus caught up to her, breathing hard. "See? Nobody here." They turned back toward the lights, and Nathaniel let them go. The real family reunion played out in front of the store. Rachel Kim holding her son tight, scolding and crying simultaneously. Nathaniel retreated deeper into the shadows, his hunger unsatisfied, but his mind racing with thoughts he'd suppressed for 2 centuries. What was he doing? What had he become? The questions weren't new, but tonight they felt heavier, more insistent. He returned to his lair, an abandoned copper mine 40 miles outside of Globe, Arizona. He'd claimed it in the 1920s, digging deeper into the earth, creating chambers that daylight never touched. Inside, he'd accumulated the debris of his long existence, newspapers from every decade, photographs of people he'd known and killed, journals filled with handwriting that had evolved from careful Victorian script to modern print. He sat in the deepest chamber, surrounded by darkness so complete it would have driven a human mad, and tried to remember the last time he'd felt anything other than hunger. The memory came unbidden. 1963, outside of Flagstaff. A woman named Dorothy Palmer, 43, a widow who ran a roadside diner. He'd entered her establishment at closing time, intending to feed. But she'd seen something in his face, some echo of the human he'd been, and instead of fear, she'd shown him kindness. "You look lost, honey," she'd said, pouring him coffee he couldn't drink. "Sometimes the desert does that to people, makes them forget where they're going." They'd talked through the night, Dorothy sharing stories of her late husband, her grown children who never visited, her dreams of seeing the ocean before she died. Nathaniel had listened, and for those few hours, the hunger had faded into background noise. When dawn approached and he'd risen to leave, Dorothy had touched his hand. "Whatever you're running from, I hope you find peace with it." He'd killed her 3 nights later, returned to the diner and drained her life while she slept in the apartment above. He told himself it was necessity, that the hunger always won in the end. But the truth was simpler and more damning. He'd killed her because her kindness reminded him of what he'd lost, and he couldn't bear the weight of that reminder. Nathaniel opened one of his older journals, reading entries from decades past. The pages detailed kills with clinical precision, names, dates, methods. But scattered among the records were other entries, questions he'd asked himself across the long years. Can a monster choose to be anything else? Is redemption possible for something that feeds on innocence? Does God see what I've become? And if so, why hasn't he ended me? He'd never found answers, only more questions. But tonight, remembering the boy in the parking lot, David Kim with his real fear and his mother's real love, Nathaniel felt something shift inside him, a crack in the foundation of what he'd become. The storm that had been threatening for days finally broke just before dawn. Rain hammered the desert, flooding arroyos, turning dust to mud. Nathaniel stood at the entrance to his mine, watching water cascade down the mountainside. Storms in the desert were violent and brief, the earth too hard to absorb much moisture. So the water ran off in torrents, reshaping the landscape in hours. He wondered if he could be like that, if centuries of accumulated darkness could be washed away, leaving something different underneath. The thought was dangerous. Hope had no place in a vampire's existence. Hope led to mistakes, and mistakes led to destruction. Yet he couldn't quite extinguish the small flame that had kindled somewhere in the vicinity of where his heart used to beat. 3 weeks passed. Nathaniel hunted differently now, carefully, taking only those who wouldn't be missed. Undocumented migrants crossing the desert alone, homeless drifters with no families to search for them. He told himself he was being pragmatic, reducing risk. But late at night, in the deepest part of his mind, he admitted the truth. He was trying to minimize harm while still feeding the hunger. It was a compromise, a middle ground between what he was and what some buried part of him wished he could be. It wouldn't last. It never did. The call came on a Saturday morning in December, carried to him on the wind. Not a physical sound, but something older, a vibration in the air that only his kind could perceive. Another vampire, somewhere in the Superstition Mountains. Nathaniel hadn't encountered one of his species in over 60 years. They were rare, solitary creatures and territorial to the point of violence. The presence of another in his hunting grounds was a challenge, a threat that couldn't be ignored. He waited until sunset, then ran through the desert with the speed that made him nearly invisible to human eyes, covering 30 miles in less than an hour. The other vampire waited on a ridge overlooking Canyon Lake, silhouetted against the last purple light of dusk. She was younger than Nathaniel, transformed perhaps a century ago, with dark skin and features that suggested Native American heritage. When she turned to face him, her eyes held the same ancient weariness he saw in his own reflection. "You're the one they call the Mimic," she said. Her voice was soft, almost musical, nothing like the harsh rasp Nathaniel had expected. "I'm Ayasha. I was Dine before this." She gestured to herself, to what they both were. "Now I'm just hungry and tired and so fucking alone I sometimes scream into the desert just to hear something respond." Nathaniel approached cautiously. "This is my territory. You need to leave." Ayasha laughed, bitter and sharp. "Your territory. The desert belongs to no one, bloodsucker. But relax. I'm not here to challenge you. I'm here because I heard something. Whispers carried by others of our kind across the southwest. They say the Mimic has gone soft, that you let prey escape, that you hesitated when you should have struck." She cocked her head, studying him. "Is it true?" The question hung between them like smoke. Nathaniel considered lying, but what was the point? "Maybe," he said finally. "Maybe I'm tired too. Tired of the hunt, tired of the killing, tired of existing without living." Ayasha nodded as if she'd expected this answer. "I was turned in 1924 by a creature that came up from Mexico. He made me hunt my own family first, said it would break what was human in me faster. He was right. I killed my mother, Halona, age 56. My father, Honovi, age 61. My younger brother, Keme. He was only 14. Her voice remained steady, but her eyes gleamed with something that might have been tears if vampires could cry. "I've spent 100 years trying to fill the hole that left inside me. You know what I learned? The hole just gets bigger." They sat together on the ridge as the stars emerged, two predators sharing the weight of their choices. Ayasha told him about the others she'd met, the small network of vampires scattered across North America. "There's one in New Orleans who only feeds on murderers. Takes him months to confirm each target, but he's convinced it makes him less of a monster. There's another in Vancouver who runs a blood bank, steals expired units, and makes them last. And there's one in Chicago," she paused, "who walked into the sunrise last year, couldn't carry it anymore." Nathaniel listened, and for the first time in decades, didn't feel completely alone in his cursed existence. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. Ayasha stood brushing dust from her jeans, an oddly human gesture. "Because you're at a crossroads, Nathaniel Cross. I can see it. You're either going to embrace what you are completely, become a true monster without conscience, or you're going to try to find another way. And I wanted you to know that if you choose the second path, you won't be the first to try. You'll just be the latest in a long line of failures." She started to walk away, then turned back. "There's a girl, human. Her name is Sofia Martinez, age 17. She's been researching disappearances in Arizona, connecting dots that no one else has noticed. She knows something is out here, something unnatural. She's getting close to the truth." Ayasha's smile was sad. "She's your choice, Nathaniel. Hunt her, silence her, protect your existence, or help her, expose yourself, and see what happens. But choose soon. She's planning to come out to these mountains next week, alone." After Ayasha vanished into the night, Nathaniel returned to his mine and didn't emerge for 3 days. He spent the time reading every journal, every account of his 200 years of killing. The names blurred together, hundreds of them, each one a story cut short. He calculated that he'd taken approximately 1,847 lives. The number should have meant nothing to him. Instead, it felt like a physical weight pressing down on his shoulders. On the third night, he made a decision. He would find Sofia Martinez. Not to kill her, but to watch her, to understand what drove a 17-year-old girl to hunt monsters in the desert. Finding her was easy. Sofia had a blog, Arizona Anomalies, where she documented strange occurrences across the state. Her most recent posts focused on missing persons cases around the Superstition Mountains, noting patterns that made Nathaniel's blood run cold with recognition. She was smart, methodical, and dangerously close to the truth. Her profile picture showed a girl with brown skin, dark eyes, and a determined expression. According to her bio, she lived in Mesa with her grandmother, Elena Martinez, 71, and planned to study criminal justice at ASU in the fall. She wanted to be an FBI agent specializing in cold cases. She had no idea she was about to become one. Nathaniel tracked her to Mesa Central High School on a Monday afternoon. He stood across the street, Watching students pour from the building, a sea of backpacks and noise. Sophia emerged with two friends, a heavy-set boy with thick glasses named Timothy Chen, 16, and a girl with purple-streaked hair called Raven, no last name given, also 17. They talked animatedly about something on Sophia's phone, heads bent together. Nathaniel focused his enhanced hearing on their conversation. "I'm telling you, the pattern is clear," Sophia was saying. 23 disappearances in 5 years, all within a 40-mile radius of the Superstition Wilderness. No bodies ever found, no evidence of foul play. People just vanish. Timothy pushed his glasses up nervously. "Sophia, maybe there's a logical explanation. Drug cartels, human trafficking, people getting lost in the desert. For 5 years," Sophia interrupted. "With no one finding anything? Not even bones?" Raven put a hand on Sophia's shoulder. "Your grandmother is going to freak if you actually go out there. You promised her you'd wait until college, until you had proper training." Sophia's jaw set in a stubborn line that Nathaniel recognized. He'd seen that expression on countless faces over the centuries, right before they did something brave and stupid. "I'll be 18 in 2 months. I can make my own decisions. Besides, I'm not going alone. You two are coming with me." Nathaniel felt something cold settle in his stomach. Not hunger, fear. Not for himself, but for these children playing detective, walking straight toward a monster they couldn't comprehend. He could stop them. Use his abilities to create distractions, obstacles, anything to keep them away from the mountains. Or he could let nature take its course. They would come, find nothing, get discouraged, and move on with their lives. Except Nathaniel knew better. Sophia had the scent of truth, and people like her didn't give up easily. If he did nothing, she would keep searching until she found something. And in the Superstition Mountains, the things you found usually killed you. He made a choice that would have seemed impossible weeks ago. He would protect them, not from a distance, not through manipulation. He would go to Sofia Martinez and tell her the truth. The decision terrified him more than anything he'd faced in 200 years. Revealing himself to a human, especially one determined to expose the supernatural, was suicide. But Ayasha had been right. He was at a crossroads. The old path led only to more darkness, more killing, more empty years stretching into infinity. Maybe the new path would destroy him, but at least it would be different, at least it would mean something. He waited until the following Friday, when Sophia's blog announced she was going to the public library to research historical disappearances. The Mesa Public Library's archives section was nearly empty at 7 p.m., just Sophia hunched over a microfilm reader and an elderly librarian reshelving books in the next room. Nathaniel entered without sound, moving through shadows until he stood behind her. Sophia was reviewing newspaper articles from the 1950s, her notebook filled with dates and names. "You missed several," Nathaniel said softly. Sophia spun around so fast she nearly fell from her chair. Her hand flew to her purse, probably reaching for mace or a weapon. She was smart enough to arm herself. "Good." "Who the hell are you?" Her voice came out steady despite the fear in her eyes. "How did you sneak up on me?" Nathaniel raised his hands in a placating gesture, staying in the shadows where the overhead fluorescent lights couldn't reach him clearly. "My name is Nathaniel Cross. I'm the reason you've been finding patterns in the disappearances. I'm what you've been looking for." Sophia's expression shifted from fear to skepticism. "Right, and I'm supposed to believe some creep who stalks teenage girls in libraries." She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling security." "Look at the article you're reading," Nathaniel said. "April 14th, 1953. Missing prospector named Gerald Watkins, age 37, last seen near Canyon Lake. They never found him." Sophia glanced at the microfilm screen, then back at Nathaniel. "So you read about an old case. That doesn't prove anything." "I killed him," Nathaniel said simply. "Drained his blood and left his body in a mine shaft that collapsed in 1967. He had a wife, Margaret, and 2 daughters, Louise and Carol. Margaret died in 1982, still believing he'd abandoned them." He stepped closer and Sophia scrambled backward, her chair scraping against the floor. "Go through your list of names, Sophia. I can tell you how each one died. I can tell you details that were never reported." I can tell you because I'm responsible for most of them. The librarian called from the other room. Everything okay back there? Sophia's eyes never left Nathaniel. Fine, she called back, voice only slightly strained, then quieter to him. Prove it. Tell me something about a case that wasn't in the papers. Nathaniel recited from memory. December 8th, 2019. Marcus Holloway, 29, hiking alone near Hieroglyphic Trail. You have him on your list. The official report says he likely fell and the body was scavenged by animals. But Marcus had a tattoo of a compass rose on his left shoulder blade, and he was wearing a wedding ring with an inscription inside. To my North Star, love Jess. His wife reported him missing, but the ring was never found because it's buried with his bones in a cave at coordinates I can give you. Sophia's face had gone pale. How could you possibly know that unless... She trailed off, the implications crashing over her. Nathaniel could see her mind racing, trying to reconcile what she was hearing with rationality. Unless you killed him, she finished, or you're completely insane, or this is some elaborate hoax. No hoax, Nathaniel said. I'm a vampire, Sophia. I've been killing in Arizona for 200 years. You were right to search for patterns. You were right that something unnatural is happening. But you were wrong to think you could investigate it and survive. He moved then, faster than human eyes could track, and was suddenly beside her, close enough that she could see the unnatural pallor of his skin, the slight point of his canine teeth, the complete absence of breath in his chest. I could kill you right now before you could scream, before you could blink, but I'm not going to. Sophia pressed herself against the wall, phone clutched in trembling hands. But she didn't run, didn't scream. Her voice shook but remained defiant. Why not? If you're really what you say, why reveal yourself? Because I'm tired of being what I am, Nathaniel said, and because you're going to get yourself killed if someone doesn't warn you. The Superstition Mountains aren't safe. I'm not the only dangerous thing out there. He stepped back, giving her space. Go home, Sophia. Forget about this research. Live your life, go to college, become an FBI agent if that's what you want, but stay away from the supernatural. It never ends well for humans who go looking for monsters. Sophia's jaw set in that stubborn line again. That's not going to happen. If you're real, if vampires exist, then people deserve to know. They deserve to protect themselves. Nathaniel felt a surge of frustration and grudging admiration. You don't understand what you're dealing with. I'm showing you mercy by warning you. Others of my kind won't. Then help me, Sophia said suddenly. If you're so tired of killing, if you want to be different, then help me. Teach me how to protect people from things like you. Give me knowledge instead of warnings. The request caught Nathaniel off guard. In all his years, no one had ever asked him to fight against his own nature, to actively work against what he was. It was absurd, impossible, suicidal. Why would I do that? He asked. Sophia met his eyes, and in her gaze he saw the same determination that had driven him to cross a continent in 1847, seeking fortune and adventure. Because you came here to tell me the truth instead of killing me, because part of you wants to be more than a monster, and because I'm going into those mountains whether you help me or not, at least if you're with me, maybe I'll survive it. Nathaniel stood in silence, ancient and powerful, and completely undone by the courage of this teenage girl. Finally he spoke. If I agree to this, you follow my rules. You don't investigate alone, you don't take unnecessary risks, and if I tell you to run, you run without question. Sophia nodded. Deal. Your friends, Timothy and Raven, they can't come. The fewer people involved, the better. They're my team, Sophia protested. We're in this together. Then you're all going to die together, Nathaniel said flatly. I'm serious, Sophia. What we're dealing with doesn't care about friendship or loyalty. It will kill anyone in its path. Sophia bit her lip, thinking, Fine. I'll tell them I'm postponing the trip, but I want something in return, information. I want to know everything. What you are, how you became this, what else is out there. Over the following weeks, Nathaniel found himself in the strangest situation of his undead existence. He met Sophia 3 times a week in various locations around Phoenix, always after dark, always in places where they wouldn't be observed. He told her about vampire physiology, their strengths and weaknesses. Yes, sunlight would kill them, burning them to ash in minutes. No crosses and holy water did nothing. Garlic was a myth, as was the requirement to be invited into homes. Wooden stakes through the heart worked, but so did decapitation or any injury that destroyed the brain or heart completely. "We're hard to kill, but not impossible," he explained during one session in an abandoned warehouse in Tempe. "The main advantage we have is speed, strength, and the fact that most humans don't believe we exist." "What about turning people?" Sophia asked, taking notes in a journal she'd started keeping. "How does that work?" Nathaniel's expression darkened. "It's rare. You have to drain someone almost completely, then feed them your blood while they're still barely alive. Most don't survive the transformation. Their hearts stop and never start again. Maybe 1 in 10 makes it through. And those who do." He paused, remembering his own transformation. They wake up to hunger, endless, consuming hunger. The first kill is always instinctive. By the time they understand what they've done, it's too late to go back. Sophia absorbed this information with the focus of a dedicated student. She was brilliant, Nathaniel realized. Not just intelligent, but capable of accepting information that contradicted everything she'd been taught about the world and adapting to it. "Are there other supernatural creatures?" she asked during their 4th meeting. "Beyond vampires?" Nathaniel nodded. "I've encountered a few things over the years. Spirits mostly. Ghosts trapped in locations where they died violently. I saw a skinwalker once in northern Arizona near the Navajo reservation. That was in 1973. We gave each other a wide berth. There are rumors of other things, creatures from indigenous folklore that predate European settlement, but I've never confirmed them myself." As January turned to February, something unexpected happened. Nathaniel began to look forward to their meetings, not because of the hunger, which he carefully satisfied elsewhere, hunting drug dealers and violent criminals in Phoenix's shadows. He looked forward to talking with Sophia, to her questions, her insights, the way she challenged him to think about his existence differently. She made him remember what it felt like to be human, to have curiosity and hope, and the belief that tomorrow might be better than today. One evening, as they sat on the roof of an abandoned hotel in downtown Phoenix, watching the city lights spread below them like a field of stars, Sophia asked the question Nathaniel had been dreading. "Have you ever tried to stop? To not kill?" He was quiet for a long time before answering. "Once, in 1998. I went 2 years without feeding, trying to starve myself to true death. It doesn't work that way. The hunger doesn't kill us. It just grows stronger until it overrides everything else. When I finally broke, I killed 11 people in 3 nights, a family camping in Sedona. Mother, father, 3 children, and the grandparents. The youngest was 4 years old. His voice remained flat, emotionless, but inside, the memory burned. After that, I accepted what I am. It's better to kill consistently, stay in control, than to lose myself completely." Sophia was silent, processing this horror. Finally, she said, "What if there was another way? What if you could feed without killing?" "Impossible," Nathaniel said. "We need life force, not just blood. We drain the spark that animates humans. You can't take that without extinguishing it." "But have you tried?" Sophia pressed. "Have you experimented with taking less, leaving someone alive?" Nathaniel shook his head. "The hunger doesn't work that way. Once we start feeding, the instinct is to drain everything. It's like asking a drowning person to only swallow a little water. Instinct can be controlled," Sophia argued. "That's what separates thinking beings from animals. You're talking to me right now instead of killing me. That's control." She had a point. Nathaniel had been exhibiting more control lately than he'd thought possible. "Even if I could take less, leaving witnesses alive would expose me. Every person I feed from would remember, would tell others." "What if they didn't remember?" Sophia pulled out her phone, showing him an article about hypnosis and memory suppression. "There are documented cases of people blocking out traumatic memories, whole events erased by the mind's defense mechanisms. What if vampire abilities include some form of mental influence? Have you ever tried to make someone forget?" Nathaniel stared at the article, mind racing. He'd never attempted anything like that. The few times he'd tried to communicate with victims before killing them, he'd focused on calming them, making the end easier, but actively manipulating memory. "I don't know if it's possible," he admitted, "but if it is, wouldn't that change everything?" Sophia's eyes gleamed with excitement. "You could feed without killing. Actually be the person you keep saying you wish you could be." The idea terrified and exhilarated Nathaniel in equal measure. To feed without killing would mean he could finally stop adding to the count of lives destroyed. But if it went wrong, if he lost control or couldn't erase the memory, he'd create a witness who could expose him. "Let me think about it," he said. Sophia nodded. "I have to go anyway. Grandmother thinks I'm at a study group, and if I'm late she'll send out a search party." She stood, slinging her backpack over her shoulder. "Same time Thursday." "Same time," Nathaniel confirmed. He watched her climb down the fire escape, waited until she reached her car and drove away safely. He'd taken to following her home each night, making sure nothing harmed her. When had this human become so important to him? When had her life started to matter more than his hunger? The answer came 3 nights later, when everything went wrong. Nathaniel was hunting near South Mountain, tracking a meth dealer who'd been terrorizing a neighborhood in Guadalupe. He'd become selective about his prey, choosing only those whose deaths might be considered justice rather than tragedy. The dealer, Carlos Mendoza, 34, was a violent man with a history of assault. Nathaniel was about to strike when he heard it. Sophia's voice, screaming. Not the real Sophia, he realized instantly, but a perfect mimicry of her voice, desperate and terrified, calling his name. "Nathaniel, help me, please." The voice came from deeper in the darkness, away from the dealer. Nathaniel froze, every instinct screaming warning. It was a trap. It had to be. No one knew about his connection to Sophia except the two of them. But if something had found out, if Sophia was truly in danger. He abandoned the dealer and ran toward the voice, moving faster than thought. The screams led him to a dry wash between hills, and there he found not Sophia, but Ayasha, the vampire who'd visited him months ago. She smiled grimly. "Worked better than I expected. You really have gone soft." Before Nathaniel could respond, 2 more vampires emerged from the shadows. One was male, Hispanic, with scarred arms and eyes like chips of obsidian. The other was female, Asian, young-looking, but with the bearing of something ancient. "Allow me to introduce Mateo and Lynn," Ayasha said. "They're part of a council, sort of a governing body for our kind in the Southwest, and they're very interested in you, Nathaniel." Mateo spoke with an accent that placed his origins in Mexico. "We've heard disturbing reports. The great Mimicked has befriended a human, shares secrets with her, plans to teach her how to hunt us." His expression hardened. "This cannot be allowed." Nathaniel backed against the wash's wall, calculating escape routes. "Sophia is no threat to any of you. She's a teenage girl with curiosity, nothing more." Lynn laughed, cold and brittle. "A teenage girl who's mapped patterns of our feeding grounds, who's researching ways to kill vampires, who represents everything we've worked to keep hidden for centuries." She moved closer, inhuman speed making her seem to teleport. "The council has discussed this extensively. We've decided the girl must die. You've been given the honor of doing it yourself." "No," Nathaniel said flatly. "Find someone else for your wet work." "It's not a request," Ayasha said, and for the first time, Nathaniel heard regret in her voice. "Kill her. Prove your loyalty to your own kind, or we kill you both. Those are the only options." Nathaniel laughed, harsh and bitter. "My loyalty? I've been alone for 200 years. Where was this council when I clawed my way out of a mine shaft half dead? Where were you when I was learning to hunt, making mistakes, leaving bodies where they'd be found? Now that I've finally found something resembling purpose, you appear with demands." He bared his fangs, feeling the hunger rise. But this time, it was fueled by rage rather than need. "You want her dead? You'll have to go through me." The fight was brutal and fast, 3 against 1, and while Nathaniel was old and strong, the others fought with coordinated precision. Mateo struck high while Lynn went low, and Nathaniel barely managed to dodge, his arm torn open by Lynn's claws. Vampire blood, black and thick, sprayed across the desert sand. Pain exploded through him, sharp and demanding. He grabbed Lynn and threw her against the wash wall hard enough to crack stone, but Matteo was already on him, teeth seeking his throat. Nathaniel twisted, taking the bite on his shoulder instead, then drove his fist through Matteo's ribcage. The other vampire screamed, a sound like metal scraping metal, and stumbled back. Ayasha watched without participating, her expression unreadable. Nathaniel didn't wait. He ran, using every ounce of speed he possessed, knowing the others would recover and follow. He had to reach Sophia first, had to warn her. His phone was in his pocket, a recent acquisition at Sophia's insistence. Everyone has a phone, Nathaniel. Even vampires need to text. He pulled it out while running, fumbling with the unfamiliar technology, finally managing to send a message. Run. They know. Don't go home. Meet me at the place we first talked. He didn't know if she'd see it in time, didn't know if he could reach the library before the council found her. Mesa was 20 miles away. Nathaniel covered the distance in under 15 minutes, pushing his supernatural abilities to their limits. He arrived at the library bleeding from multiple wounds, his shirt shredded. The building was closed, dark except for emergency lights, no sign of Sophia. Nathaniel circled the structure, searching for any trace of her. His phone buzzed. Sophia's response, "On my way, are you okay?" He typed back quickly, "Leave Phoenix tonight. Go somewhere they can't find you." "Who can't find me?" "What's happening?" "Other vampires. They want you dead. I'll hold them off, but you need to disappear." There was a long pause before her response came. "I'm not running. Tell me where you are." Nathaniel wanted to scream. Of course she wouldn't run. Sophia Martinez didn't back down from danger. She ran toward it. That's what made her special. And that's what was going to get her killed. He heard them coming before he saw them. Matteo and Lynn moving through the night like shadows. Ayasha was with them, completing the triangle. They spread out, surrounding the library. "She's not here," Nathaniel said, stepping into view. "I sent her away. You'll never find her." "Then we have no use for you either," Matteo growled. He attacked, and this time the fight was to the death. Nathaniel fought like he hadn't fought in 2 centuries, driven by something beyond survival. He was protecting Sophia, protecting the only light that had entered his darkness in so long. When Matteo came at him, Nathaniel met the charge, both of them crashing through the library's front window in an explosion of glass. They rolled across the floor, tearing at each other, vampire strength cracking tile and splintering furniture. Lynn joined the fray, and it was all Nathaniel could do to keep from being overwhelmed. He managed to pin Lynn, his hand wrapped around her throat, prepared to tear her head from her shoulders, when Ayasha's voice cut through the violence. "Stop! All of you! Stop!" Everyone froze. Ayasha stood in the broken window, and beside her was Sophia Martinez, very much alive and holding a compound crossbow loaded with a wicked-looking bolt. "Put him down," Sophia said, voice steady despite the fear Nathaniel could smell on her. "Or I put this through your friend's heart." She had the crossbow aimed at Ayasha. Matteo laughed. "You think that frightens us, child? We're faster than you can pull that trigger." "Maybe," Sophia agreed, "but I read that vampires are protective of their sires, the ones who turned them. Ayasha turned you both, didn't she? I saw the file Nathaniel keeps, the one that tracks your kind. She's listed as your sire." Sophia's eyes never left her target. "How fast are you really? Fast enough to reach me before this bolt goes through her heart?" The confidence in her voice was absolute. She would do it if provoked. She was 17 years old and facing down monsters, and she wasn't backing down. Nathaniel released Lynn slowly, stepping back. Matteo and Lynn looked to Ayasha, awaiting her decision. The older vampire studied Sophia with what might have been respect. "How you've got steel, girl, I'll give you that." She turned to her progeny. "Let them go." "Ayasha," Matteo protested. "The council can discuss this further with me," Ayasha interrupted. "I made Nathaniel aware of this situation. I'm responsible for how he chose to respond. If anyone faces consequences, it should be me." She looked at Nathaniel. "Take your human and leave Phoenix. Go far enough that you're not our problem anymore. And, Nathaniel, the next time our kind comes for you, I won't be there to call them off." Nathaniel moved to Sophia's side, gently lowering the crossbow. "We're leaving. Now." Sophia nodded, backing toward the parking lot, weapons still ready. Only when they were in her car, driving fast toward the interstate, did she finally relax. "That was insane," she breathed. "I almost died. We almost died." "You should have run when I told you to," Nathaniel said, checking the rearview mirror for pursuit. "You came anyway, why?" Sophia's hands shook on the wheel. "Because you needed help. Because that's what people do for each other." She glanced at him, and Nathaniel saw tears streaming down her face. "And because I was so scared that they'd kill you, and I'd never see you again, and that terrified me more than my own death." The admission hung between them, profound and impossible. Nathaniel had no words for what he felt. Gratitude, wonder, fear for this brave, foolish girl who'd risked everything to save a monster. They drove through the night, heading north toward Flagstaff. Somewhere along the way, Sophia pulled into a rest stop and finally broke down, sobbing from the adrenaline crash and terror. Nathaniel sat beside her in the car, wanting to comfort her but unsure how. He settled for staying close, a silent presence in the dark. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "This is my fault. You were right to research the supernatural, but I should never have encouraged it. I've put a target on your back." "No." Sophia wiped her eyes. "You tried to warn me away. I pushed. I made my choices. But Nathaniel, we can't run forever. They'll keep coming." She was right. Nathaniel had made enemies of his own kind by choosing a human over vampire law. They would hunt him relentlessly now. And Sophia, for knowing too much and refusing to back down, would be considered a threat to the secrecy that kept vampires safe. "There might be a way," Nathaniel said slowly. An idea was forming, dangerous and possibly suicidal, but the only solution he could see. "If I could convince the council that you're not a threat, that you could actually help maintain the secret instead of exposing it." "How would I do that?" Sophia asked. Nathaniel turned to face her fully. "By becoming someone who hunts the things that threaten to expose the supernatural. The rogue vampires, the ones who kill too obviously, the creatures that draw attention. You'd be like a supernatural liaison, someone who handles problems before they become public knowledge." Sophia's eyes widened as she understood. "You want me to be a hunter, but not hunting to kill vampires, hunting to protect the secret that they exist." "Exactly," Nathaniel said. "With my guidance, my knowledge, you could do what no human has done before. Police the supernatural world from the inside. The council might accept that. They might see you as an asset instead of a liability." "And if they don't?" Sophia asked. "Then we run until there's nowhere left to run," Nathaniel admitted. "But at least we try." They drove to Flagstaff and found a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. Sophia got a room while Nathaniel waited in the car, the approaching dawn making him nervous. She brought him extra blankets, which he hung over the windows to block out any sunlight. As Sophia collapsed on the bed, exhausted beyond words, Nathaniel sat in the corner, keeping watch. "Get some sleep," he said. "I'll make sure nothing disturbs you." Sophia's eyes were already closing. "Nathaniel, thank you for trying to be different, for caring whether I live or die." "Thank you," he replied softly, "for reminding me why that matters." He watched her sleep as the sun rose outside, its killing light blocked by cheap motel curtains and donated blankets. For the first time in 200 years, Nathaniel Cross felt like he was guarding something instead of hunting it. It was the strangest sensation, and somehow it felt like coming home to a place he'd never been. Over the next 2 weeks, they made their case to the council. Ayasha, surprisingly, became their advocate, arguing that Sophia's proposal had merit. "The girls' research already mapped our territories better than we've done ourselves," she pointed out during a tense meeting in an abandoned church outside Sedona. "And there are rogues out there, newborns with no control, who leave bodies where they shouldn't. Sophia could handle cleanup, misdirection, keep authorities from looking too closely." Mateo remained skeptical. "Or she could document everything and publish it. We'd be destroyed." "Then she'd die immediately after," Sophia said calmly. "I'm not stupid. My survival depends on the secret staying secret. I have no interest in becoming a martyr." Lynn, who'd been silent throughout, finally spoke. "Show us. Prove you can do what you claim. There's a rogue in Yuma, newly turned, maybe 6 months old. He's killed 9 people in 2 weeks, all messy, all obvious. Handle that situation, and we'll consider your proposal." It was a test, possibly a death sentence, but Sophia agreed without hesitation. She and Nathaniel drove to Yuma, spending days researching disappearances, tracking patterns. Sophia proved to be a brilliant investigator, connecting dots that Nathaniel would have missed. "He's staying near the Colorado River," she determined, pointing to a map covered in pins and notes. "All the disappearances are within a mile of the water. He's using it for disposal, dumping bodies in the current." They found the rogue on the 5th night, a young man who'd been turned while hiking in the desert. His name had been Jacob Walsh, 22, college student, gone missing the previous summer. Now he was a creature driven purely by hunger, with no control, no consciousness beyond the need to feed. Nathaniel approached him first, trying to talk, to reach whatever humanity remained. But Jacob was too far gone. He attacked without warning, faster and stronger than his age should have allowed. Nathaniel fought defensively, trying not to kill, but Jacob wouldn't stop. Finally, Sophia made the call. She'd been waiting with a crossbow, this one modified based on Nathaniel's specifications. The bolt was wood, blessed in a church she'd found in Yuma and tipped with silver. Not all the myths were false. Silver poisoned vampire blood, slowing regeneration. The bolt struck Jacob in the chest and he screamed, clawing at it. Nathaniel moved in quickly, pinning the younger vampire. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. "You deserved better than this." He ended Jacob Walsh quickly, cleanly, and scattered the ashes in the Colorado River. They'd prevented 9 families from ever knowing what happened to their loved ones, but they'd also ended a young man who'd been a victim himself. It didn't feel like victory. Later, in their motel room, Sophia cried for Jacob Walsh, for the person he'd been, the life he'd lost. Nathaniel sat beside her, and this time he did offer comfort, awkwardly patting her shoulder. "This is what the work will be," he said. "Sometimes there are no good choices, only less terrible ones." "I know," Sophia whispered, "but that doesn't make it easier." The council accepted Sophia's proposal. She would become their liaison, handling situations that risked exposure in exchange for protection from vampire law. She would be marked, a magical symbol tattooed on her wrist that identified her as under council protection. No vampire could harm her without facing collective punishment. It wasn't perfect safety, but it was more than most humans got. As Ayesha performed the marking ritual, using ink mixed with ash from ancient vampires, she warned Sophia, "This life you're choosing, it's not the one you dreamed of. No college, no FBI, no normal future. You'll walk between worlds, trusted by neither. Are you certain?" Sophia looked at Nathaniel, then back at Ayesha. "I'm certain." The months that followed established a new rhythm. Sophia handled investigations, Nathaniel provided knowledge and protection. They solved cases across Arizona and New Mexico, then Utah and Nevada. Rogue vampires, malevolent spirits, creatures emerging from places better left undisturbed. Sophia proved herself capable and brave, earning grudging respect from the supernatural community. And Nathaniel. Nathaniel changed. With Sophia's help, he experimented with feeding less, with using the mental influence she'd hypothesized. It worked. Not perfectly and not every time, but he could take enough to sustain himself while leaving victims alive. Their memories clouded, believing they'd had dizzy spells or blackouts. He went entire months without killing. The hunger never disappeared, would never disappear. But for the first time in 2 centuries, it didn't control him completely. On a cool evening in November, 1 year after they'd met, Nathaniel and Sophia sat on a ridge overlooking the Superstition Mountains, the same mountains where she'd planned her ill-fated investigation, where everything had changed. "Do you ever regret it?" Nathaniel asked. "The life you gave up?" Sophia considered the question carefully. "Sometimes I wonder what college would have been like. Dating, parties, normal problems. But then I remember what we do, the lives we save. That matters more. She smiled at him. Besides, how many people can say they're friends with a 200-year-old vampire? Friends, Nathaniel tested the word. In all his long existence, he'd never had a friend. Victims, certainly. Enemies, absolutely. But a friend? Someone who knew what he was and cared anyway. Yes, he said. I suppose we are. Sophia leaned against his shoulder, a gesture of trust that still amazed him. Tell me a story, Nathaniel, from before, when you were human. So he did. He told her about Boston in 1845, about cobblestone streets and gas lamps, about his mother who smelled like lavender and his sister who loved to read. He told her about the young man who dreamed of adventure and fortune, who'd headed west with hope in his heart. That young man had died in a copper mine in Arizona. But maybe, Nathaniel thought, maybe some part of him had survived after all. Not in the monster he'd become, but in the choice to be something different. To protect instead of hunt, to care instead of kill. The stars emerged overhead, ancient and constant. The desert stretched around them, beautiful and deadly, hiding secrets in its shadows. And for the first time in 200 years, Nathaniel Cross looked at the night and didn't see it as a hunting ground. He saw it as home, not the lonely, cursed home he'd known for so long, but something new, something built on friendship and purpose, and the strange, impossible bond between a vampire who'd learned to be human and a human who'd learned to live with monsters. The road ahead would be dangerous. The Council's trust was fragile, earned day by day. There would be more rogues to hunt, more secrets to protect, more impossible choices to make. But they would face it together. A vampire and a hunter, walking the line between darkness and light, trying to make the world a little safer, a little better, one case at a time. It wasn't redemption. Nathaniel had done too much, killed too many, to ever truly be redeemed. But it was something, a purpose beyond survival, a reason to face the endless nights ahead, and sometimes that was enough. High above them, a shooting star streaked across the sky, burning bright before fading into nothing. Sophia made a wish. Nathaniel didn't. He'd stopped believing in wishes long ago, but he was learning slowly to believe in something else, in second chances, in change, in the possibility that even monsters could choose to be more than what they were made to be. The hunger would always be there, a shadow inside him, but so would the choice to fight it. And that, he was beginning to understand, was what made him more than just another predator in the dark. It made him Nathaniel Cross, vampire and protector, monster and friend. It made him, against all odds and in defiance of his cursed nature, something resembling human again.